Hey there, and welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. My name is Joy Rios, and today I'm talking with the one and only Stacy Hurt. She's a patient engagement consultant, healthcare advocate, survivorship activist, digital health strategist, and keynote speaker. She's an award-winning pharma executive who lives as a healthcare consumer every day as a caregiver for her intellectually and developmentally disabled son, and as a stage 4 colorectal cancer survivor herself. In this episode, she shares her story and best advice, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's get started. Stacy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I know we have crossed paths in so many different areas. I don't think we've ever had a chance to meet in person, but we've definitely are in our Venn diagram of places that we hang out. We have a lot of overlap, but have never really had the opportunity to just like one-on-one get to know you and your story, even though I've heard quite a bit about it. But would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself and your, like, where you live in the healthcare ecosystem? Like, where do you play and spend your time?
Great questions. Well, first of all, yes, it is awesome to be with you. And I think we've talked in Clubhouse. I was supposed to meet you at HIMSS 21. And then unfortunately, my oncologist put the kibosh on that. I wasn't allowed to come. So this is just awesome to be with you today. And thank you for having me, Joy. It's a true pleasure. So I would say sort of my story is that I worked in healthcare. You know, I got my education in healthcare. I have an MBA, I have a master's in health administration. And then I started a career in healthcare, actually with a health IT company as a customer service rep, as I think everyone should start their career being either a server, as like a waiter or a waitress, if you would, and then as a customer service rep, because I think you learn so much about life. And then I was with a physician practice management company, and then I went into pharma. And as I was, I loved being in pharma. I was a sales rep. I loved it. I loved building relationships with all kinds of people. And when I worked at the physician practice management company, I worked side by side with doctors. So I really got an insight into how doctors think, what's important to them, how they're compensated, revenue cycles, coding. And I did a fair amount of health IT when I was at the PPM as well. But when I was in pharma, my first big healthcare event happened to me, and that was the birth of our younger son, Emmett, and in 2005. And he missed all of his 6-month milestones, and we knew something was wrong. So the first step was discovering, it was trying to figure out why. And the first thing we did was he went for an MRI of his brain, and it came back completely blank. So we knew something was wrong. And then we went on this journey.
Wait, what do you mean it came back blank? How does it come back blank?
So you hear this term that your brain is gray matter.
Uh-huh.
So his came back completely white.
Okay.
There was no gray matter in his brain, which meant there was what we came to find out was no brain myelination. So you hear this term myelination like in wiring, right? That there's like sheets on wires that make the connections. There were no connections in his brain.
Wow.
And it was terrifying. I mean, when his MRI came back completely abnormal, then it was like, what is it? And he has a large head. So it was we met with 60 different specialists we stopped counting at 60. And was it hydrocephalus? What was it? And of course, when I was pregnant, I was tested for all the normal. I was 35 at the time. So I was tested for Down syndrome, and he passed all the normal blood work because as we came to find out, he had a very, very rare chromosomal disorder, one of 3 in the world known cases.
Still, is that still the truth?
Well, that's a good question. He's due, we have to resequence him, to resequence his genes. But I'm in a number of support groups. There's Unique, there's Chromosome Disorder Outreach, and I still have not found a 1Q duplication at where his exists.
Wow.
So it's very rare. Bottom line is it's extraordinarily rare. I mean, one is the biggest chromosome in the body, so he's globally affected. You've heard me say he doesn't walk, talk, do anything for himself. He's basically a 16-year-old baby. And it threw my world into a tailspin. I had to take 6 months off of work. I was depressed. I didn't know what to do. I mean, and here my husband has his MBA. We met in grad school. He worked in healthcare. I worked in healthcare, and there was no playbook for this.
Yeah.
We had no idea, what was happening. And so, it was just sort of figuring it out and lining up. He was a baby, so it's going through the diagnosis, then it's getting early intervention, and you have all these therapists coming into your home, one after another. I really spent a lot of time crying,
The thing that comes up for me is that must have been profoundly isolating.
It was. Joy, what I remember most was I was, and I've told this story 1,000 times and I still get really choked up because it's my son and I love him so much, as you know. But I remember sitting at my desk in front of, I live in sort of like one of those idyllic neighborhoods, on a cul-de-sac with all the, Ryan homes, and the other parents had their kids out on the street, like on their bikes, and they're just like standing, having a beer and talking to each other while their kid is just off like biking or running around. And I thought, that'll never be me. That'll never be me. To just have that carefree, I don't know where my kid is type of thing. And I still hear it. And as you see, it's really close to the surface. It still hurts. Yeah. And so that happened. And obviously it changed my perspective to the point where I had to take an early retirement from my career in 2008 to get everything squared away. My older son was 2, and I had a dip. So I dipped. And then once I kind of got things back on track, I went back to work, and I was head of training and development for a smaller pharmaceutical company. And that was 2011. And I loved it. They were super flexible with what I had going on at home. I was traveling like once a month. It was great, doing a lot of like webinars and stuff for training. And then in 2014, I was traveling and I started having really bad fatigue. I had abdominal pain. I had some blood in my stool. And I just kept saying to my husband, I'm like, I feel like crap. But I thought, our Emmett is up once a night at least. So I just thought it was like wear and tear and take care of him. And I just sort of ignored it. And a lot of my friends had internal hemorrhoids. And I'm like, it's a nuisance, whatever. I'll get it taken care of whenever. And then the pain just it was intense. It was like doubled over pain. And I was an athlete my whole life. I have a pretty high pain tolerance. I'm pretty tough. And so I was like, I got to, get this checked out. And my doctor was like, well, I think it's internal hemorrhoids. I don't think it's anything, but I'm going to send you for a colonoscopy just to be sure. And then the rest is history. I mean, he went in for the scope. The tumor was so big in my rectum, he couldn't get the scope around it. He aborted the procedure. He woke me up, said, you have cancer.
Oh my God.
And I just was in disbelief. I'm like, I was out running 2 days ago. I work out every day. I eat healthy. I take good care of myself. I don't smoke. Like, how could this happen? And he was like, I mean, I had like all the nurses were crying. Everybody was around me. Like, it was stunning. It's still stunning.
Is it just genetics? Is it like, is there a reason?
Yeah, it's classified as early age onset colorectal cancer because I would not have been screened. I was 40. It was my 44th birthday when I got my PET scan back that I was diagnosed. And we're chalking it up to genetics. We think our best theory is that I have some sort of mutant DNA because both of my parents have autoimmune disorders. And then there's me, and then we know what's going on with Emmett. That, so I have definitely funky genes. I have some sort of mutant DNA. And
too bad it can't give you, it gives you superpowers, but in a different way now.
I'll claim that. Yeah, here I am. Genetic superpowers, activate. But yeah, so I will just, like I said, the rest of the story is history. 55 chemos, 2 surgeries, radiation, all of it, and I'm now 6 years cancer free, which, everybody, when I give the speech, everybody cheers, which is cool. Which is very cool. But how we got through those days of me being on chemo and handling our son, I will never know. I will never know how we did that. I mean, my parents basically moved in with us. My husband's a hero, but I don't know. I'm just really glad to be here, and I treasure every single day my feet hit the floor. I mean, I am so grateful to be here, and I think, that's really why I'm so fueled on my mission. So where are we now? So, all this, so I worked in healthcare, all this happened with my son, all this happened to me with colorectal cancer. And I was in the support groups and online, and everybody's like, how do you file an appeal? How do you fight for a PET scan? How do you do? And I was like, oh, well, this is what you say. This is what you do. This is how you talk to a doctor. And they were like, wow, Stacy's like some sort of an expert. And I was like, well, I worked in healthcare, so I know how to say all this stuff. And so it just kind of, my advocacy career really started there, with online support groups and advocating for colorectal cancer. And then, of course, beating an 8% chance of survival, of course, my story was amazing too. So I sort of became this sort of mini, like I said, expert / hero. And then I grew, and I'm like, there's something here. There's a mission to be held here for patients, like how to navigate the system, what to say, how to talk to doctors. There's a real thing here. So, I worked as long as I could at my small pharma job. But then, I came out of that, started getting well, and HIMSS put out this call for be an influencer. So this is the end of 2019. And I had known HIMSS, of course, from working in healthcare. I knew all about HIMSS. And I said to my husband, I said, they need somebody like me. They need to hear from somebody who worked in the system and has been a caregiver and a patient. I said, they need somebody like the voice of the people. They need me. And he was like, apply. So I applied, and I said, well, there's no way they're going to care to let me in, but I'm going to apply. And I remember when I got the email, it was like around Christmas, I think, of 2019. And I said, holy, we won't edit that, but I said, holy crap, I got it. And he's like, good for you, honey. That's amazing. And so then I started connecting with these people with 20,000 followers, like Jamie and Rasu and Gita and Lygia. And they started like opening their arms to me and really believed in me. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to HIMSS 2020, and I'm going to launch this whole consulting business of the patient voice and my expertise being on both sides. And again, Joy, the rest is history, and we know what happened. But it's continued. It's continued online, which has been great for me, being here, we lost our nursing through COVID. Of course, we know what's going on with nurses being deployed to the front lines. So I was the primary caregiver. So I couldn't really do anything full time except take care of my son. And nobody was really doing anything, but it was great. I kept speaking virtually, and it has evolved, and I have gotten clients, and here I am. So that's the whole story.
Well, so it sounds, yeah, but so are you like Stacy Hurt in consulting company? Like, is that like, if somebody, are you an independent, or you have your, okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So I have my independent business. I only kind of really work it part-time because of being primary caregiver for my son. So my consulting business, I'm compensated to speak. Part of my business is just doing inspirational speaking And, for companies, for sales conferences, I'm glad to speak to Parexel in January at their global summit. I do a lot of work with Medosity. I spoke for Red Hat. I've spoken for some pharma clients, and just, being sort of like an inspirational keynote speaker. And I love that, like telling the whole story. But then my secret sauce with that is that I walked in their shoes, like I did what they did. Like if they bring in somebody like, Troy Aikman, I mean, I love Troy Aikman, but he doesn't know what it's like working in our business, right?
Right.
So, and so I get, to do a fair amount of that. And then I have a couple of clients that are like, well, we want you to look at our strategy. Is it patient inclusive? Is it patient centric? Does this wording make sense? And I have to straighten a few of them out. Like, I'm like, no, this isn't going to fly. This isn't a good look. Patients aren't going to feel good about this. So, the fortunate part, like to your question about, and my friend Gil Bash says it the best. I have really kind of touched every single part of the healthcare ecosystem.
Right.
So when I get in conversations with IT or marketing or sales or operations or even finance, I can at least understand what they're talking about and relate to them and help them develop a strategy.
Well, that's the part that I was curious about, because it's great to be inspirational and it's great to like leave people with a feel good story, but like I want to know what action that also inspires. And what I would like to hear is that after people hear you talk, they're coming up to you and saying, I need your expertise to help guide me so that we can be better advocates for the people and the patients that we serve.
That is happening. I can tell you 100% that is happening. And I can tell you that somebody was walking around with a Stacy Hurt sign at HIMSS 21 because I got flooded with requests and I wasn't even there. I wasn't even on site. I wasn't even there. So I could only imagine if I was there. But yes, fortunately, people will hear about me, hear me on a panel, and they will follow up and say, Stacy would really like to work with you. And then I do have an hourly fee that I charge. And it just really depends on what they're looking for. But a lot of it is, I can't really talk too much about my clients, but, a lot of it is content, strategy, feel, front-facing collateral, website redesign, social media. That's really my strength. I mean, I'll tell you, I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I'm not from a background of research. I'm not a numbers cruncher. All of my advocate friends who are in research, I give them tons of credit. I say that I come in on the translational research end of that. And, I take what those studies say and I make it work for whatever business they're in.
Okay. Now I want to ask about the fire that you have that drives you. Like, what question do you ask yourself, each day when you wake up? But for me, for a while, it's been like, what's the most impactful thing that I can do? And then that helps me decide how I'm going to spend my day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything like that for you?
What drives me is, and I'm very, as you see, I'm very respectfully outspoken on social media. Especially, segue is these patient conferences, patient experience conferences about patients that don't include patient voices. That's really what gets me. You want to know what gets me? That's what gets me. Okay. They're all talking about patients, and I openly identify as a patient. 7 years later, I still have my port in. I still go for blood work every 6 weeks. I am still under active surveillance by my oncologist. I am very much a patient. So I identify as a patient. So, you can't be talking about patients and not including the actual patient voices, the actual patients that it affects,
Right.
So I think, like I said, having worked in healthcare and talking about patients and now being on this side of it as a caregiver, as a patient, what really drives me is bringing the two together. I definitely see a gap. And that's where I saw my services being needed, and that was a business model that could make money, but make things better. I want to make a positive difference in the world, but I want to be paid for it too. I mean, I'm a business person.
Yeah, of course.
And, but it just, what really drives me is that patients are not, they're being marginalized. And then of the patient group, that the patients that are marginalized, it is the people that don't have access to the healthcare they deserve. Joy, I always talk about the fact that, I am white, I am privileged, I am fortunate, I am blessed, to know what to ask, to know what questions to ask, to be able to get in a car, to drive to an appointment. What do the people do who need public transportation, who are working 2 jobs just to get by, who can't afford their medicines, who can't afford internet to check their test results on the patient portal? What do all those people do? And that's another part of my mission is everybody should have access to the same health care that I do, that this white privileged suburban mom has, everybody, and so in turn have access to the best outcomes that they deserve. So I don't know. I'm just on a mission I'm just the people's champion. I'm on a mission.
I love it. Well, so what's the best way to hold a mirror up to these people? Like like if we're talking about the conferences, that are about and for patients, but not including them, is it to shame them on social media? It is to put a letter writing campaign together, or offer your services? Like, I guess my question is, do you feel like it's intentional? Like, do you think it's part of the model to be that way, or they're just literally ignorant that they're doing this thing?
Yeah. I think, I think they're just oblivious. I think it's just the way that things have always been done. And I think that it's just a matter of re-education and realignment. What happened with COVID? Well, in the year 2020, it was a couple things. I mean, you had COVID, but we really saw the social justice movement come into light, and, unfortunately, the murder of George Floyd really showed, that we have some serious miles to go, okay, as a country, there's serious inequity and inequality. And I think as part of that, there was really an amplification of marginalized voices. And as I said, patients were a marginalized group, right? They were sort of, I use the analogy that I think that the healthcare system views patients like cars, right? These cars, like when they break down, they go into the shop to be fixed, right? And the mechanics work on the cars to get them back on the road, and that's it. It's not like the mechanics are talking to the cars. It's not like the cars have anything to say. It's just part of the job. And I think that's how the healthcare system, I don't want to single out, physicians or clinicians or anybody, but I think that the healthcare system just looks at patients as cars, like they're broken. We're going to fix them. We're going to get them back out there, but now the patients are speaking up and saying, hey, this is what I need. I don't know about this. Can you explain this to me? I don't understand this. And that's really rocking the system. That has never happened before to the extent it's happening now. And to your point, I think it's just re-educating. I don't ever want to shame anybody. I want to educate them. I want to enlighten them. I want to respectfully include patients. And, but in a very bold way, I do want to call them out and point out to them how it can be done better.
I love that. I mean, that's like a method after my own heart, which is like, it's not about necessarily shaming anybody, but let me show you, there is a better way to do this that is more inclusive and that like takes into account a more full picture. Maybe not a complete picture, but at least a more full one.
Yeah, totally. And, I think, if like I had my what I'd really like to do, I don't want to say like my dream job or whatever, but I know that I'm sort of an N of one over here, somebody that who worked in healthcare and has been on the receiving side of it. I'd love to train new Stacys. I'd love to train a whole new tribe of many Stacys that, can do what I do, that can be on a panel and speak respectfully, intelligently, and everything about the experience that they've had to help industry, to help health systems, to help doctors do better, do whatever they do better.
Yeah.
And because that's my dream. I'm really grateful. I guess it would put myself out of a job, but that's fine because
Not
I would.
really. There's plenty of work to be done. It's not like there's.
Yes, there is definitely plenty of work to be done,
Yeah.
as I see every day out there. Yes. And, it's funny because I worked in healthcare and repeatedly, I'm so grateful for these opportunities that, that I get to include my voice with, but I just had scratched my head like, nobody else is doing this. Like nobody else is thinking to say this. Like nobody else is getting this. And repeatedly, to your point, Joy, there's a lot of work to do. There are a lot of gaps.
Mm-hmm.
We are still miles and miles away from a level playing field.
I mean, so if you had advice for somebody who wanted to go into patient advocacy or make a difference even for their own patient journey, you've learned a lot. Like, what would you share?
Yeah, do not be afraid to ask questions. That's number one. I think white coat syndrome is alive and well. I think that patients are still so intimidated by their doctors. And I think the best advice is if you don't understand your plan, ask a question, number one, and have an open communication with your doctor and say, well, what does that mean? Well, how can, who's going to help me do that? Who's going to, because that comes into like patient navigation. I mean, again, I'm really lucky with resources, but these patients can't do it on their own. I mean, they need more social supports in place, more economic infrastructure and supports, and we need more policy changes. That's just a whole different thing. But I would say on a very basic, granular level, as a patient, if you don't understand what's happening in your appointment, don't be afraid to ask a question. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification. Don't be afraid to get a second opinion if it doesn't feel good. Do you trust your gut intuition if it doesn't feel good? If you don't feel like you can carry out what the doctor's asking you to do, if the doctor says, lose 25 pounds, if you're in a food desert or you don't have access to food or whatever, don't be afraid to speak up and say, doctor, I can't do that. And here's why. Help me, those types of conversations would make all the difference, and I just still don't think that they're happening because I think patients are still afraid and I don't want them to be afraid.
Well, I imagine that they can also connect with other, like you had mentioned, different support groups. Like, where is that where patients can also get support of like leaning on their peers, of people going through something similar and sharing?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have access to the internet and you can go online and just do a keyword search of whatever condition, chronic illness, whether it's cancer, diabetes, hypertension, whatever it is, mental health, whatever it is, find your people. Yeah, absolutely. Find a support group online. If you don't have access to the internet, go to your local hospital, look on a bulletin board, try to get an in-person support group and try to find some people who look and feel and act like you do. And they can empower you also. Yeah. Support groups are just such a vital part of our healthcare culture and ecosystem and healing, and building community. I mean, look, I got a whole new community being a HIMSS influencer, starting with you. I got all new members of Team Stacy. I mean, I got the long arms all around them, giving them a big virtual hug and everything. And look what you've done for me, how much you've empowered me and inspired me to keep talking and keep fighting. And those times that, I'll get like, the occasional hater that says, we're not going to do it that way. And I'm like, but then you guys are like, get back out there, Stacy, you're making a difference.
You are making a difference. And I think that when people see you and what you're doing, it gives them permission to maybe be a little bit more bolder as well.
Absolutely. It's not the Stacy Hurt show, believe me. I put myself out there, like you said, Joy, so that others know they can too. People say, oh, Stacy, you're so relatable or whatever. Oh my gosh, that's like the biggest compliment that I could ever get, that, because you shared your story or because you were out there, fighting for X, Y, and Z, we did too. And you inspired me to ask my doctor to get a colonoscopy, to do this, to question this. That is the best and biggest compliment that, what I've gone through in my life and what I've suffered and endured, if that can empower or inspire or, lift up somebody else, that's why I'm here, despite an 8% chance. That's why I'm here. 100%.
100%. 100%. I think also there's a lot of what I have, the talk I give myself a lot of the times is like, if somebody can't see it, then it's hard for them to be it. Or that it's like, so if nobody else is gonna show, like, I guess it's another way of saying like show versus tell, and having the courage to like just show up and be an example or be a leader in a space. And it's really hard to even think of yourself like, I spend a lot of time alone and with my dog. So it's really hard for me to feel like a leader most days.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can ask. I have a regular talk with Jamie Edwards about imposter syndrome. I'm like, Jamie, a lot of people are, saying I'm this and that. I don't, I think I'm way over the handlebars here. I don't know about I'm like, is it me? But then there's the days that, one person, like you said, says, because of you, I did X. And that's where you realize you're making a difference and you are leading and you're making positive change, and you keep going and you keep driving. And even when, I've sat in meetings and I get the same question all the time, like, Stacy, well, tell us about your business. What are you? And I told this one client, I said, you know what? I don't really know. I'm just making it up as I go along. And it was like the CEO. And I was like, they're never going to hire me. And he said, we do that too here, but we call it innovation.
That's right.
Fake it till you make it, but we call it innovation. So.
Every day I'm waking up and is deciding to do something that matters. And do I know what's going to happen the next day? No, but I'm going to keep doing it.
That's it. And that's especially now in a global pandemic that is still so very real. That's all any of us can do. We're all doing the best that we can. And I just think, I've said incorrect things. I've done incorrect things, but I've always led with love. Every time I lead with love, and I lead with an open heart and an open mind. Look, I don't know what this is, especially with my friends who are, gay or trans or people of color or differently abled or whatever. I'm routinely messing up, if you would. Okay. But I say, I'm like, I want to learn more. Will you help me? Will you help educate me as to how you're feeling with this? And like, what are your biggest challenges so I can understand and I can fight for you? And that's the way that conversation goes, back to your point, I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. I don't view vulnerability as a weakness. I view vulnerability as a strength, because that leads to the courage to change.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. I think that where you're coming from is something also I really identify with, which is like recognizing your privilege. Like I 100% recognize that, like I live in this like kind of both sides of the fence. My last name is Rios. I'm Hispanic. I'm white presenting, but like I identify as Hispanic, even though people look at me like you're a white girl, right? And like I know that based on how I look and how I present, I
Mhm.
have been given either opportunities, the
Wow.
benefit of the doubt. I've been given, like, just people don't expect anything bad from me ever, which is a huge privilege. Not to say that I'm out there like causing all kinds of damage. I'm not. However, I mean, I had my moments, in my lifetime, but nobody would ever expect that from me. And I recognize that, like, there are people who have lost their lives or gone to prison or been expelled or had like some major consequences based on something a lot smaller, and having done something similar, like walking down the street with your hoodie up, right?
Right. Right. Well, I mean, again, none of us should be making any assumptions about anybody right now, like that's like number one. I mean, you gave a great example of how an assumption worked to your advantage, luckily, but then we have assumptions, I'm just going to say it maybe about like people of color or something like
Absolutely.
that, that are unfair, completely unfair, unfounded, unreasonable.
Yeah.
And why would you feel that way? That implicit bias like that, it's disgusting. I mean, why would you do that? You don't even know that person,
Right.
um I just think, again, with what we've all been through these past 2 years, where there's been so much loss of life, there's tremendous burnout by on our clinician community. um can we just give everybody a chance? Can we can we just give everybody a pass, and let's get a reset, and let's again lead with love and an open mind and an open heart, and get to know one another on a personal level. Something
Mhm.
I always talk about real quick is, when I'm on panels, I love to talk about, obviously, technology making our lives better. But something I'm really passionate about is technology should not replace a relationship, especially with a clinician. My oncologist, he was invested in me. My nurse, she was invested in me. They're two of the main reasons I'm still alive, other than my family, my husband, my kids. But technology should not replace a relationship. As we see this sort of portable healthcare system come into play with consumerization, and I admire that and everything, but if you're just going to like have like a doc a day, I am not down with that at all. I am all about the connectivity that we see across the wires should be the connectivity that we have on a personal basis. It
Yeah.
should enhance it. It shouldn't replace it.
Yeah, I
Feel really
definitely agree
strongly.
with that. I definitely agree with that. I think
Yeah.
that's a great message. And yeah, I get a little bit intimidated by some technology too. I know a lot of it is for the good, but there's part of me too that's really hesitant. Like, I don't want to live in a virtual world. Like,
No, no, everybody thinks, yeah, everybody's like, oh, Stacy, she's this big telehealth proponent. And I'm like, no, Stacy's a big option proponent. Okay.
right.
Stacy wants patients to have as many options as we can. I had shingles earlier in the year. It was a terrible pain. You better believe, as a cancer survivor, stage 4, I was running into a face-to-face appointment. I was not doing that telehealth. They offered me telehealth. I said, no way, I am coming in. I don't, because this might be, what if this is a recurrence, so fortunately, my doctor saw the rash, knew immediately it was shingles. Thank goodness. I should have known that, but I didn't know that. But no, I mean, technology is about increasing options and making what we have already better.
Hmm.
Not a replacement for anything at
Hmm.
all. Never. So,
Well, Stacey, if people want to support you and follow you and work with you, connect with you, or just be inspired by you, where do you recommend that they go to find you?
well, thank you for asking, Joy. I would say my best my biggest and best platform is Twitter. I love Twitter, because I love connecting with people, and my sorority sisters all call me the glue. I keep everybody together. I love that. But I'm out on Twitter at Stacy_Hurt, STACYHURT, Hurt. But please, feel free to contact me through my website, stacyhurt.net, and any other way, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. I am all out there and willing and ready to talk to anybody. So
Good.
And yeah, this has been great today, Joy. I really appreciate you having me on. I hope it's been worthwhile for your audience.
100%. I'm so happy to have you and hear your voice and amplify you and know, I want more people to know what you do so that you can inspire more people to do the same, because it's very, very important work. And I think that I am grateful to know you.
Well, I am grateful to know you too. And I want to jump back on another Clubhouse with you and chew the fat a little bit and get some dialogue going. And no, but I appreciate this opportunity, and onward and upward in 2022, man. Stacy is not stopping. She's only picking up more steam in 2022, and we're going to keep talking and keep changing the world for the better. And I appreciate doing that with you.
Good. Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.